Hello everyone, welcome to all of you on my YouTube channel Saurabh Goswami History Optional for UPSC. So this video is part of our free lecture series on history optional subject for UPSC, and here we are covering paper 2 of UPSC history optional and section A, that is modern Indian history. And in this lecture we are going to discuss chapter 1, that is the arrival of Europeans in India or European penetration in India. This entire module is based on topic and subtopic wise format, chapter wise format, and here we are covering a very important subtopic, and that is the Dutch presence in India. And today's discussion is about the conflict of Dutch with the local powers, the conflict of Dutch with their European counterparts, the nature of Dutch imperialism in Indonesia. Basically, we want to have a very basic introduction about that. So in this way, by understanding the conflicts of Dutch with the local powers and their European counterparts, we will try to learn about the rise and fall of Dutch power in India. So this topic has been divided into 4 parts in the form of 4 videos. So all the basic facts and informations I have already covered in my previous lecture, that was lecture number 7, where I have discussed the basic fact and informations about the Dutch presence in India. So today in lecture number 8, we are going to discuss the nature of Dutch imperialism, the conflicts, etc. And there will be 2 more videos. Okay, so in the lecture number 9, in the next video, I will discuss the historiography part of this chapter. And lastly, we will try to discuss some PYQs, or you can say that model questions, to integrate the theme that we have discussed in a more detailed manner, in a more holistic manner. So let's start the discussion of this particular chapter and lecture number 8. So let's start the discussion. So in this lecture number 8, like I told you that here we need to learn about for example, in order to understand the nature of Dutch imperialism, we need to discuss the story about how Dutch established themselves as an important political force in India. The very basic fact that Dutch were more interested in Spice Islands, Indonesia, we all know, and there was Dutch imperialism in Indonesia. So that too we will learn. We will also try to understand that if we compare different European groups like Portuguese, Dutch, French, English, which one of these European groups was the most cruel? Okay, so you will also get the answer after the conclusion of this chapter. So for that, we need to discuss the conflicts here. Why? Because when Dutch came to India, in last class I have already discussed the timeline with you, that is 1605 AD to 1759 AD. So this is largely beginning of the 17th century and 18th century. So you can see here that the Dutch power ascended in the 17th century. So the story we need to learn. But before Dutch, there was already a very important political power, European power, you can say European power. They were present in India, and that group was Portuguese. And the Portuguese focused on maritime expansion. They also have some strong footholds in the coastal areas, okay, western part, and they were trying to monopolize trade and commerce along with their missionary zeal. This we have already discussed. So if Dutch want to enter in the Asian trade, if they want to use the Cape of Good Hope route, or if they want to do trade and commerce in Southeast Asia, if they want to do trade and commerce in Malay Peninsula, Indonesia, so they will have to fight with the Portuguese. So obviously the Portuguese conflict with Dutch will take place. The second important point, if Portuguese were already dominant in India, So what will happen? There may be two possibilities. First, there will be some local rulers who will not be happy with the Portuguese policy of religious intolerance and dominance. So those powers who are unhappy or dissatisfied with Portuguese, the Dutch will take help and support of those political powers. And this might be a possibility that there will be some groups who are getting benefits by the presence of Portuguese in India. They are Indian groups. So they will be called sympathizers of Portuguese presence in India. So Dutch will have to fight with these sympathizers of Portuguese presence in India. So Dutch will have to use a diplomatic method. They will have to get support of some, and they will have to fight with some Indian groups. Okay, so the Dutch will do this, but at the same time we see the third important counterparts, that is British also came to India. The story you all know, 1600 English East India Company was set up, and I have already discussed this information in the last class. 1608 1613, 1608 first contact, okay, and 1613 we see that a factory was set up. So the Dutch have got a new rival here, okay, and the competition is very tough. On one side they have to fight with the Portuguese, okay, they will have to fight with the naval dominance of the Portuguese. On the other side there are British, and Dutch will have to handle the British also. So it means that the conflict which we are going to discuss has two aspects. The first is the Dutch conflict with the local rulers here, the Dutch conflict with the local rulers, and the second is Dutch conflict with their European counterparts. And here, while discussing among the European counterparts, we will focus more on Dutch conflict with Portuguese and Dutch conflict with English. This is the point. But overall, the story has the essence. And what is that essence? That the Dutch presence in India was primarily commercial. It was not territorial. Always remember. For example, okay, British presence in India was territorial. British focused on territorial annexations. British focused on collection of land revenue. British focused on establishing political control. Company established itself as ruler in India. But the Dutch had not such intentions. It means, what is the intentions of Dutch? Dutch are present in India and their intentions are primarily commercial. Please write these keywords, primarily commercial. They will be helpful for you in writing the answer of the comparative questions. Okay, so that is primarily commercial. We can say it was not territorial. So this is a very important information that you must know, that when you look at the Dutch presence, when you look at the nature of the conflicts, the nature of the trade and commerce, the policies which they followed, you will realize that it was largely non-territorial. Okay, the first important thing. It means if their main purpose, objective or intention is commercial, in this case, whatever conflicts that will take place here on Indian soil with the local rulers or European counters, generally the conflicts will be related with the issues of either trade privileges, or they will be related to the issues of controlling ports or important trade centers, or the conflicts will be related to enforcement of some monopoly contracts. Here we see a very special thing, that is monopoly versus monopoly. The Portuguese tried to establish their monopoly by introducing Cartaz system, and the Dutch are trying to establish their monopoly by introducing monopoly contracts with the local people. So the contracts, if they are unilateral, if they are forced upon, okay, if the contracts has been signed by the use of coercion, use of force, so those contracts are a kind of monopoly contracts. So Dutch were involved in such kind of monopoly contracts. So whatever the conflicts that we see here, the conflicts are related to control over trade privileges, control over trade privileges. This may be one issue. The conflict may be related to controlling some ports or important trade centers, controlling some ports or some important trade centers. The conflicts that are related to monopoly contracts, because when the Dutch will sign some such kind of monopoly contracts, so it will be opposed by the European counterparts. The next important thing, Portuguese, okay, when they will fight with India, for example, in the case of local rulers, I have already discussed that though Dutch will fight with those local rulers. I have already discussed that Dutch will come in conflict with those local rulers who are the sympathizers of Portuguese, or the Portuguese are having some Indian allies for their help and support. So if Dutch want to counter the presence of Portuguese, in this situation, Dutch will also have to fight with these Indian allies. So this special tendency we'll see. So those local rulers are okay, who are in support of Portuguese will fight with Dutch. But those local rulers, you can say, but those local rulers who are hostile to Portuguese, look here, those local rulers who are hostile to Portuguese, those local rulers who are hostile to Portuguese, those local rulers who are hostile to Portuguese, so these rulers will be, you can say, in alliance, or they will be allies of Dutch. Okay, it means that here the diplomacy or diplomatic efforts will play an important role. So here we see what the important role of diplomacy. The second important thing here is that Portuguese main focus was increasing their maritime presence. Portuguese were mainly focused previously on increasing their naval superiority. It means that they are more powerful at sea. So if Dutch want to counter the Portuguese, so Dutch will also have to focus on naval superiority. Dutch will have to focus on presencing, on doing what? Militarization of oceanic trade, maritime expansion. The Dutch will also have to do this. It means here the Dutch presence in India has two important aspects or dimensions. The one important aspect is naval, and the second important aspect is diplomacy. That is the important thing. Naval plus diplomacy. So this is an important, you can say that, takeaway from this topic. And another important takeaway that I discussed with you in the beginning of the lecture, that the Dutch presence in India was primarily commercial. It was not territorial. So this is another important takeaway. So when I am doing discussions in detail, so what you have to do, you have to focus on the important keywords that I am discussing with you. Okay, so once you develop command over important keywords, and by these open lectures, okay, obviously you will develop a good command over the concepts. Okay, so this will help you in answer writing. So always I emphasize that what we need to do, we must try to have a detailed discussion on the themes, so it will ultimately reduce or minimize the need for reading a large number of books. Second, we can better understand and decode the questions that are being asked in examination. The questions will not appear alien to us. Okay, and if we have selected some pages notes to us, for example, if you have completed your optional and if you have completed European presence in India, notes in 5 or 6 pages, suppose you have some printed booklet where 3 or 4 pages are given, okay, and out of that you want to develop understanding which will be able to, okay, cover any unpredicted question in UPSC optional. So this is not good. Either you will have to do self-study, a detailed study, or you will have to take help of those lectures which have the detailed discussion, okay, in their class program. So that is an important thing. Now we are coming ahead. Now this is a simple map. Why I want to show this map? There is a reason behind this. Okay, the trade routes have been given here. The red color mark here. Okay, these are the trade routes in 15th, 16th, 17th century. These were the most popular trade routes. And the blue color line here, okay, this is the trade route. It means this is Europe. Here Portugal, Lisbon is given. Previously we have discussed the topic Portuguese, and we see that Portuguese are doing trade and commerce. Portuguese presence in India, Goa was their administrative center, and Portuguese are not only present in India. Look here, this is what? Cape of Good Hope, and this sea route was discovered by Vasco da Gama. It has been written here in 1498, and Portuguese dominated this entire trade route. This is also a kind of choke point for the Portuguese. Okay, blue water policy, okay, Carthage system. Not only this, I have also discussed that Malacca, Hormuz, they were also important choke points and they were under the control of Portuguese. So this is Calicut, where Vasco da Gama reached in 1498. And here if you look at the trade routes here, these are the trade routes. Now when Dutch will come to India, okay, so when Dutch will come, Dutch are mainly interested where? In Spice Islands, Indonesia, Southeast Asia. Dutch main interest lies here. If Dutch will come to India, okay, where they will focus to establish, or what will be the eastern coast here, you can say the Coromandel coast will be their most favorite destination. The Dutch presence in India can also be marked here. On Malabar coast there are important trade settlements. In Bengal also there is Dutch presence. Okay, so but main presence can be seen on Coromandel coast and Malabar coast. Okay, so before I enter into details of the topic, I want to discuss some of the important trade settlements of Dutch in India. This will be helpful in your prelims examination also, and this will also be helpful in building concepts of English and French. There is a very interesting thing. For example, if you look at the PYQs, you will find that from this chapter, UPSC generally asks question from English or French power in India. But the most interesting thing is that unless you will not develop a good command over Portuguese and Dutch, you will not be able to understand the core essence of the English and French. So the questions are being asked from English and French, but in order to understand English and French, the good understanding of Dutch and Portuguese is also needed. So sometimes we do what? We prepare in a way where we target questions, that which part questions are being asked, we prepare that part only. Okay, so that is good time saving study. If you don't have much time, clear prelims examination, so you can do that. But if you have time doing detailed study, so that strategy is not good. Okay, so for that reason I will discuss the Dutch presence in India, some important settlements here. Okay, here we talk about the Coromandel coast, and this is Malabar coast. You all know this. Okay, this map will make it more clear. This is Coromandel coast and this is Malabar coast. Okay, so there will be headquarter here in Coromandel coast of Dutch, a headquarter in Malabar coast of Dutch presence. In Bengal also there will be a headquarter. In Odisha, you can say in Patna also there is an important settlement. So all I will discuss. So let's discuss a few basic things, basic facts and informations. For example, first we are talking about Coromandel coast. In geography, you must have studied. In last class, I have discussed with you that suppose this is a rough map. So this Coromandel coast and this is Malabar coast. So the Coromandel coast was important for what? Textiles. Here the Malabar coast is important for what? Spices. Got it? And Dutch are more interested where? In Indonesia, Spice Islands. And here the textiles from this Coromandel coastal area, the textile that is manufactured here was high in demand in Southeast Asia. So if the Dutch will get textiles from this Coromandel coast, so they can take here in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, okay, and they can get spices in exchange of these textiles. And that's why the Coromandel coast was, you can say, the most important part of the business of the, okay, Dutch in India. So this Coromandel coast is the most important. Okay, Coromandel coast. So Coromandel coast means we are talking about southeastern. This is what? Southeastern. You can write this is southeastern part or coastal area. Okay, this is southeastern part or coastal area. Okay, stretching from Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal से लगा हुआ है and covering the territories of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. ये वाला area cover कर रहा है. Got it? This is the point. Now what we see is that, okay, it means that this is a coastal area and it is between the Eastern Ghats and west of and Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal and Eastern Ghat, इसके बीच में आ गया ये Coromandel coast. Okay, and this Coromandel coast is one of the most important area of Dutch settlements in India. This is the most important thing. And on Coromandel coast there are, okay, many important Dutch settlements, and that I am going to discuss with you which are the important Dutch settlements here. Okay, so I am writing here one by one. For example, an important Dutch settlement here will be Pulicat. This can be important for prelims also. So prelims purpose also you can, okay, remember these facts. So Pulicat was, okay, for example, one name I have discussed with you in last class, and that was Masulipatanam or Machlipatanam. So Masulipatanam or Machlipatanam was the first factory, or you can say that that was the early trading post of the Dutch. But here the Pulicat was the Coromandel coast headquarter. It means that it is one of the most important destination, and Pulicat came in control of Dutch in the year 1609. Pulicat came under the control of Dutch in 1609-1610. It is one of the first major Dutch factory. You can write here Coromandel coast headquarter and first major Dutch factory or settlement here in Pulicat. Entire Coromandel coast is famous for textile. So if this is Coromandel coast headquarter, it means that it is the most important center for textile export. This is the important point. Now after this Pulicat, the second important settlement, Dutch settlement was Masulipatanam or Machlipatanam. Masulipatanam or Machlipatanam. Okay, 1605 AD, the Dutch established their control in Masulipatanam in 1605 AD, and this was a port center. Previously, it was under the control of Golconda Sultanate. Again, it will also be important center for what? Textile, cloth trade. Coromandel coast में all centers are important for what? Textile or cloth trade. In the same way, okay, The third important center was Sadurangapattinam. It is also known as Sadras. It is also important Dutch settlement on the eastern coast. Okay, or this is famously known as Fort Sadras. It means it is a fortified center. What does that mean? It means that, okay, along with their trading centers or settlements, they are also making fortresses, the same like the Portuguese. Okay, and this is also what? A textile production center. Okay, so this is important. Coromandel coast सारे centers क्या होंगे? Textile production center. Again, there is an important Dutch settlement that is known as Porto Novo. Porto Novo. Porto Novo. And this is also an important cloth textile center. It was also an important cloth dyeing center. In the same way, there is an important another center that is known as Devanamipattinam. 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 Devanamipattinam near Kuddalur. This is also an important cloth center. So let's first generalize the information that whenever we are talking about this Coromandel coast area, this is the most important textile export hub for Dutch East India Company. Okay, and this textile exporting hub is important to do trade and commerce with Southeast Asia, because from spice islands they are getting spices, and the textiles which will be produced here, okay, they will be used in exchange for the spices. So any center that is present here on Coromandel coast is an important, okay, what? Cloth or textile producing center. So I hope that you will remember the name. The most important or the major center was Pulicat. Okay, the early trading post or first settlement on this Coromandel coast was Masulipatanam. So in prelims exam, this information is exchange. Always remember, early trading post was Masulipatanam. It was not Pulicat, but the most important center was Pulicat. Okay, the Coromandel headquarter was Pulicat. So I hope that you have remembered some name. Now the second important zone here where Dutch presence can be seen was this region that is known as Malabar. This is known as Malabar. And Malabar is where? On which coast? Okay, so it is the southwestern coastal plain of India. Okay, along with the Arabian Sea. So this is Malabar, covers Kerala and also covers some parts of Karnataka. Okay, and here we see that it is a narrow coastal plain, and just from the beginning this Malabar coast was important for a spices trade. So look here, the Malabar coast is important for what? This Malabar coast is a spices trade. This is important for a spices trade. So whatever the centers we will locate here, all those centers will be important for a spices trade. Popular among Arabs, popular among Romans, and Vasco da Gama reached where? 1498 on Malabar coast, Calicut. This is the place where Vasco da Gama first reached, Malabar coast, Calicut. Okay, so this Malabar coast or Calicut center, that was the first Portuguese landing there. Okay, it was an important Portuguese center. Now when Dutch will came, this Malabar coast will also become important for them. So the most important Dutch center on Malabar coast was Cochin. Write this. The most important Dutch center on Malabar coast was Cochin. Okay, so Cochin. You can write here the most important center on Malabar coast was Cochin. Okay, let's change the slide. Cochin. And Cochin was the this is the most important Dutch settlement on Malabar coast, and this is also Dutch headquarter on Malabar coast. जैसे they had some headquarters in Coromandel coastal area. In the same way, they have headquarters in Malabar coastal area. So this Cochin or Kochi was the Dutch headquarter. You can say Dutch had maintained their strong presence in Cochin or Kochi, and this Cochin or Kochi was previously under the control of Portuguese. Now Dutch has taken it from Portuguese. So obviously there will be conflict between the Portuguese and Dutch. In the same way, the another important center here is Quilon. Quilon. It is also on Malabar coast. This is the early Dutch factory. And why Quilon will be important? For spices export, black pepper export. So this is the common concept. In the same way, the third important center here was Kannur. Okay, it is also known as Kannur or Kannur. It is also important for spices. It is important for black pepper. It was an important fort center. In the same way, Calicut, here also you can see the Dutch presence, Calicut, and the local rulers were Zamorins. So the Dutch will make good commercial relations with these local rulers, that is known as Zamorin. Calicut important for spices, important for black pepper. Okay, so you have now a good understanding about two important areas, Coromandel coastal area and Malabar coastal area, where there are Dutch presence. Now Bengal was an important zone, and in Bengal also we see Dutch presence. Now which are the centers in Bengal? So the most important center of Dutch presence in Bengal was Chinsura, Hooghly, okay, on the banks of river Hooghly. So this was the Dutch headquarter in Bengal. So in Bengal region, the headquarter for the trade and commerce was Chinsura, okay. And from Bengal, what they will export? From Bengal, which commodities will be important? So from Bengal, textile is important, plus one another important commodity was saltpeter, plus the third important commodity was opium. It means from Coromandel coast area, textile; from Malabar coast, spices, black pepper; from Bengal, what we see, textile plus saltpeter plus opium from Chinsura. Now Kasim Bazar or Qasim Bazar, okay, it was near to Murshidabad, which was the capital of Bengal's Nawab. It was the second important center, Kasim Bazar. And this Kasim Bazar again is an important textile trade center, Kasim Bazar in Bengal. In the same way, Bengal, Bihar, Odisha. So Patna, okay, Odisha, there was a center, that is Balasore. So another important center was Patna, and in Odisha, the another important center was Balasore in Odisha. Here also you will see the Dutch presence. From Patna, the Dutch were getting two things. One is what? Saltpeter, and the second is what? Opium. From Odisha, they were getting what? Balasore, Odisha. So it is, okay, you can say again here, cloth, saltpeter, these kind of things they will get. Okay, so this is Bengal region Dutch presence. Now you have got some idea about the Dutch presence, the Dutch settlements in India. I hope the idea is clear. Now we are moving ahead to the next dimension here. Now we are again entering into the story part, okay, and the story part says that, okay, the story part says that, now this is the story. We are reading about the Dutch local rulers concept. There are two group of local rulers. One group that is in alliances with the Portuguese, The second group that is hostile to Portuguese. Draw this structure. So Dutch came in conflict here. The Dutch will use what? A diplomatic outlook. The Dutch will use a diplomatic outlook, right? They will come in conflict with only that group which is in alliance with the Portuguese. So here we will see what, that the Dutch will come in conflict with this group, and those who are hostile to Portuguese, the Dutch will make alliances with this group. This is the most important thing. Now, among the local powers, the centralized authority in India, the centralized authority in India were Mughal rulers. We all know Mughal rulers. They were the centralized authority. And before Dutch presence, who was present in India? So Portuguese were present in India. Now what will happen? Portuguese policy was to establish dominance and monopoly. So obviously the central authority or the Mughal ruler will not be happy with the Portuguese. Now when Dutch will come, and Dutch also have a naval power which is superior, they have excellent military strength. So obviously what will happen, okay, the Mughal ruler, Mughal emperor, okay, will not come in direct conflict with the Dutch. Instead, Mughal emperor will try to use a diplomatic outlook that if Mughal emperor will maintain good relations with Dutch, if Mughal emperor will maintain good relations with Dutch, so this will be helpful in countering Portuguese. This is the outlook of Mughal ruler. But what we see that Portuguese were also trying to establish monopoly by Carthage system. And here, in the case of Dutch, what we see, they are doing contracts with the local business groups or the local merchants, and through these contracts are, you can say, in a kind of forced contracts, unilateral in nature. They are also trying to establish their monopoly. So here what we see, there is a conflict, and that is monopoly versus monopoly. So at some point of time, it may be a possibility, or this might be possible, that Mughal emperor and Dutch will come in conflict also on some minor issues. These minor issues may be related with the violation of imperial farman or Mughal order. Might be possible that somewhere the Mughal emperor's farmans or royal order has been violated. This might be possible that at some occasions Dutch failed to pay the custom duties. This will be opposed by the Mughal ruler, so friction or conflict will be seen. This might be a possibility that the Dutch might be doing smuggling in some areas, and this will be resisted by the Mughal authority. So there may be a conflict, but here the conflict is not very serious. The conflict is not continuous. It is occasional friction or conflict. So between the Mughal emperor and the Dutch power, what we see, the nature of conflict was occasional conflicts. What we see, the nature of conflict is occasional conflict. The nature of conflict is what? Minor conflicts. Why it is occasional or minor? Because Dutch, they don't want major conflicts. Why they don't want major conflict? Because they are not primarily focusing on territorial ambitions. They are not primarily focusing on getting more and more territories. Their prime focus or motive is commercial only. So this is the point. Now it means the Dutch policy is what? Largely, you can say, trade based commercial penetration, not territorial or political conquest. And that's why we see here occasional or minor conflicts. So here it is very clear that Dutch policy is trade based commercial penetration, you can write here, Dutch policy is what? Trade-based commercial penetration. It's not territorial expansion or extension. It's not political conquest. And that's why we see here lack of major conflict between Mughal emperor and the Dutch. So this is the story of the local powers. Got it? I hope that this much is sufficient. Okay, here we can discuss different settlements, that which settlement was previously controlled by Portuguese, later how Dutch established their control, but it will be a little bit difficult for you, and that is also not very much needed. Okay, so I hope that the main idea is clear and that you should know. Now we are coming to the next part. Okay, Dutch conflict or Dutch East India Company conflict with the Portuguese. Got it? Okay, एक बार और बता दूं, कोरोमंडल कोस्ट, मालाबार कोस्ट और बंगाल रीजन से जोड़ के लोकल पावर्स के कॉन्फ्लिक्ट को. ओके, सो द सेम टॉपिक you can also use this method to understand. So this will, you can better relate. For example, one area was Coromandel coast, the second was Malabar coast, and the third was Bengal. So let's relate the same concept here. So on Coromandel coast, what we see, minor frictions or conflicts were seen. Minor frictions or conflicts were seen. In Coromandel coastal area, basically the local rulers were the Nayaka rulers. Okay, after the disintegration of this Vijayanagar Empire, so we see the Nayaka rulers were there. So you will see minor conflict. It was minor, and the nature of this conflict was commercial. It means with this local rulers, the Dutch are not fighting for territories. Okay, somewhere the local rulers Farman has not been Farman has been violated. This might be a issue. Okay, in the same way, on Malabar coast, what we see, okay, is Malabar coast is important for what? A spices trade. It is important for black pepper trade. Previously, Portuguese had established their monopoly before Portuguese Arab traders were there. So here spices trade is very much important. Got it? So wherever you will see that the Portuguese spice trade and Dutch का जो main focus is, the main focus is Dutch is on spice trade. So here what will happen? The Portuguese commercial interest on spice trade will come in conflict with the Dutch commercial interest on spice trade. In this way, they will come in conflict with each other. And here the result can be seen where? In the form of, okay, you can say coastal areas. Okay, the Dutch will capture the footholds of Portuguese. The Portuguese will capture Dutch settlements. In this way, you can say the coastal seizures can be seen on Malabar coast region. It is also very much commercial in nature. When we talk about Bengal, I told you that Chinsura near Murshidabad. Okay, so basically Bengal, the trade and commerce in Bengal region was largely operated. Okay, Bengal Nawab is related to Mughal authority, so it is largely operated with the Mughal authority. So here also we can see some minor conflicts with Mughal ruler. They don't come in conflict, direct or major conflict. Here only some commercial issues are involved, and in that case we see some minor conflicts that I have already discussed with you. So Dutch improved their naval power. Dutch promoted a kind of imperialistic, you can say, behavior in India that is much commercial in nature. The third important thing is that they used diplomatic strategy, alliance strategy. Okay, and you will see a kind of contrast between Dutch and English. The English, when they came, they focused on making a territorial empire in India, but the Dutch from the beginning, they are not focused on making the territorial empire in India. Okay, their focus is largely shifted to Indonesia. So I think that this idea is very clear. The Dutch conflict with the local rulers. Now we are going to discuss the second important part, and that is Dutch conflict with their European counterparts. And here the Dutch conflict with Portuguese and the Dutch conflict with English, we need to cover these two dimensions. Okay, so Portuguese are already present, Dutch came. Okay, so Dutch will create challenge for the Portuguese, and okay, you can say Dutch and English power. Okay, there is a few years gap, otherwise both came, okay, you can say at the same time in a gap of a few years. Now when Dutch company will come, Dutch company VOC, I have already discussed that it is a JVC and first JVC of the world. The Portuguese company, Portuguese enterprise, is not a JVC. Now when Dutch company will come, okay, VOC will come, it will create challenges for the Portuguese enterprise, Estado da India. That was the name of the Portuguese company. And the challenges in the form of what? The challenges in the form of, first, there are two things. First is what? Portuguese maritime presence, naval power, blue water policy, cartage system. This cartage system was the main source of revenue. Now this is a powerful company, Dutch company. When they will come, they will use the sea routes or the sea passages. Got it? They will use the important choke points and they will not get the licenses. In this way, they challenged what? Cartage system. And if you are challenging cartage system, so obviously Portuguese and Dutch both will come in conflict with each other. Okay. Now, when Dutch will challenge cartage system, they will stop giving license fee. English will also do the same. Suddenly other trading groups will also do the same. And in this way, suddenly you will see there is a decline, sharp decline in the revenue collection of the Portuguese company. So here Portuguese authority, especially the revenue that was being collected from cartage system, was being challenged by the Dutch. The second important point, Dutch are mainly focused on doing a spice trade, okay, with India, Malabar coast, and in Southeast Asia, Indonesia. And before Dutch, Portuguese has already developed a kind of monopolistic control over the spices trade. So in this way, this monopoly will also be challenged by Dutch. And for that reason also, Dutch will come in conflict with the Portuguese. This is the main issue. Okay. Finally, Pulicat. The Dutch power presence in India is counted from 1505, sorry, 1505 to 1605 to 1759. This is the year, right? So here 1609, Pulicat came under the control of Dutch, but this Pulicat was previously under the control of Portuguese. And we all know that Pulicat on the Coromandel coast became the Coromandel coast headquarter, and it was one of the most important or major trading center for the Dutch. It shows what? Pulicat was previously controlled by Portuguese, now Dutch will take the Pulicat. So taking Pulicat away from the Dutch, from Portuguese, it also means that now the textile supply network has been challenged. Now this textile supply network has now come under the control of Dutch. In this way, we see that Portuguese textile businesses were also challenged, spices businesses were also challenged. In the same way, when we talk about Malabar coast, on Malabar coast, the Dutch headquarter was Cochin, and this Cochin was also previously in the control of Portuguese. And Dutch will do what? They will take Cochin from the Portuguese. And here they will use diplomatic method. They will get the support of the local ruler in order to get control over the Cochin. This is an important point. Not only this, you will see that in Sri Lanka also there was Portuguese presence, and Dutch will take the Sri Lanka from the Portuguese. Okay, in this way, the Goa, which was the administrative center, there were different routes, supply centers which were connecting Goa. All these supply centers routes were disconnected from the Portuguese, and in naval supremacy, the naval supremacy was being challenged, maritime supremacy was being challenged. So in this way we see what the beginning of decline of Portuguese power when its authority was challenged by Dutch. So the nature of conflict here is what? It is a kind of maritime commercial war. Here alliance politics can also be seen, and we see the beginning of decline or collapse of the Portuguese Empire in India. But in Goa, they will maintain, the Portuguese will maintain their strong presence. And primarily what we have seen, that the Dutch is basically a kind of trade focused group. This is an important part. Now, the second important counterpart of Dutch here is English. So it means here we need to discuss the conflict between Dutch and English. This is also a very important part, the conflict between Dutch and English. So yes, there were conflicts. देखो कैसे कैसे conflicts है. Dutch presence from 1605 to 1759. We all know this. So Anglo-Dutch rivalry, it's seen in the form of wars between this period 1652 to 1674. It means that Dutch are fighting with the English East India Company also. There was a very famous battle of Nagapattinam. Okay, and English did what? Now English came and English started controlling the Dutch trading settlements. Like Dutch came and they established control over Portuguese settlements. English came and they established control over the Dutch settlements. For example, on Coromandel coastal area, I have discussed about a place that is Nagapattinam. So this Nagapattinam came under the control of English. They took this Nagapattinam from the Dutch. In this way, we see that now English wanted to establish their trade monopoly on spices trade plus textile trade, plus they also have territorial ambitions, and they came in conflict with Dutch. So this is a conflict in commercial interest that is clearly visible. Now one event is discussed whenever we talk about Dutch-English rivalry or Anglo-Dutch rivalry. One event is very popular, and that is Amboyna massacre, and the year was 1623. This event is very popular. You can say that this single event 1623, it triggered the Anglo-Dutch rivalry. And what was this event? 1623 Amboyna massacre or incident. This event did what? This event triggered the Anglo-Dutch rivalry, Amboyna massacre. Amboyna is a place in Indonesia, it's not in India. And what was the story here? There were 10 English traders or businessmen, and they were arrested, tortured and killed by Dutch in Amboyna. Now, why Dutch killed these 10 English businessmen or traders, tortured and killed? So Dutch will say that the English were trying to establish control over their fort or settlement in Amboyna, and as a result of that, they have punished those people who were trying to establish their control over the fort. But the English are saying that no, this allegation is not true, we were not trying to do the same. And what the Dutch has done with the English traders, 10 English traders or businessmen, it is a massacre, it is a kind of anti-human act, and we will give a fitting reply of this Amboyna massacre. So this triggered Anglo-Dutch rivalry, not in Southeast Asia but in India also. Okay, this is the point. Now what will happen from this point of time? You will see that Dutch will say that we will largely focus on a spice trade in Indonesia, okay, and the English will say that we will largely focus on our trade and commerce in India. This will not happen soon. We can say that this Amboyna massacre triggered the rivalry or conflict, okay, in Asia, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, India. Anglo-Dutch rivalry was triggered by this Amboyna massacre. Got it? So this is an important point, okay, between Anglo-Dutch rivalry. I hope that you have got it. Now, what is the essence? Essence is that when we talk about the nature of imperialism is of Dutch, whenever we talk about the nature of imperialism of Dutch, it was a kind of commercial imperialism. Commercial imperialism. Here when we talk in context with India, it was largely commercial, not territorial. Dutch did what? They followed a strategy, and that is maritime strategy, because they had to deal with the Portuguese. Okay. Now, Dutch did what? In local politics, they did what? Selective intervention. Intervention only in those cases where they need to secure their trade interest. Got it? Okay. Now, like Portuguese, Dutch were also not focused on making territorial annexations, land revenue policy, making a permanent revenue base. So in long term, the Dutch power, okay, could not survive in India. And English were very smart. They did this. Okay. They focused on the annexation of territories, creating a permanent source of land revenue. This was done by the English East India Company. That's why English were successful. Now, right now, we have discussed Portuguese power. We have discussed Dutch power. In the next lectures, we will discuss about English. So, in Portuguese, what we have learned that here there is the combination of three things: crown plus commerce plus church, missionary zeal. Got it? The company, commerce means here the Portuguese enterprise was largely state controlled. It was not a joint venture. Okay. So this structure itself shows the reason for the failure of Portuguese in India. Okay. They also did what? The Portuguese also followed a policy of religious militarism forcefully. They, as a part of this Pedroado system, they promoted missionary activities. Evangelical zeal, system of inquisitions were introduced, policy of religious intolerance was followed. So the local population will become insecure. Portuguese introduced what? Cartage system. Portuguese fought some wars also and controlled the territories like Diu, Goa, Basin. They controlled these territories by fighting wars. Okay. So this is the Portuguese policy. Religious supremacy, the idea of maritime monopoly, the idea of imperial sovereignty. But in the case of Dutch, we see what? Dutch company is the first joint venture company. Focus is mainly commercial, not territorial. Okay. They are not guided by the religious zeal. It means church is absent, religious intolerance is absent. Main focus is what? Okay. Profit driven approach, because this is a joint venture company. So their main focus is on commerce and they are having a profit driven approach. Okay. And for Dutch, the most primary, you can say that they are mainly interested in Indonesia, the Spice Island. India is secondary for them. So India's loss does not matter to Dutch. Finally, they got control over the Indonesia. Okay. What about the religious outlook? It was very limited. In Dutch, you will see limited religious outlook. No missionary enterprise, no missionary effort can be seen here. Okay. The Dutch tried to develop their naval superiority, but this naval superiority was a tool to counter Portuguese naval superiority and the Cartage system. Okay. What about the political intervention, political control? Minimum political intervention, minimum control. They only wanted to promote their business in India. This is the part. But in the case of English, which I will discuss later, okay, so English East India Company will later become a JVC. And here what we see that trade and commerce is important for them. Plus what is important? Okay, trade and commerce is important, plus territorial annexation is also important. Okay, promotion of religion, church, God, this is also important, but this is secondary. It means that this is primary. This is primary. Trade and commerce is the most primary thing. Second number priority is territorial acquisition. The third priority is, you can say, promotion of religion. Okay, so just from the beginning, East India Company was trying to get control over territories. They want to get a permanent revenue base so that they could sustain the company activities in India. And gradually, when you will see that they did political interference, fought battles like Palasi, Buxar, signed Treaty of Allahabad, got revenue control. And in this way, okay, by doing political intervention, it was, you can say, the application of their revenue extraction model. They finally tried to extract the revenue. British also developed administrative, judicial, and revenue system. So the nature of exploitation that was done by British in India is more structural. It will take a very long period of time for the Indians to realize that we are being exploited. Okay, so that is an important point. Okay, so when English came, okay, we see the nature was territorial, revenue based, commercial, plus at the same time it was colonial too. But the same Dutch group did what? They were more interested in Spice Island and Indonesia. Later, Indonesia came under the control of Dutch. And when Dutch controlled Indonesia, you will find that if you look at the developments in Indonesia, Malaya Peninsula, in world history, you will read this topic in detail. You will find that in Indonesia, the Dutch developed complete control over trade and commerce. They promoted a kind of forced cultivation, and the Asian headquarters of this VOC Dutch company was also in Batavia or Jakarta. In Indonesia, their model of revenue extraction was highly, you can say, exploitative. Okay, and they promoted a kind of corporate plus military plus monopolistic imperialism. Okay, and the use of force or coercion was an important part when we talk about Dutch imperialism in Indonesia. So when you will compare Portuguese, Dutch and British, you will find that in Portuguese, the religious persecution is more visible as a result of that Padroado system. Okay, when you compare with Dutch, you will find that when you will look in the developments in Indonesia, the Dutch will appear to be the most brutal, okay, colonial powers or imperialistic forces in comparison to the British also. When you look at the British, the exploitation or colonial exploitation that was promoted by the British was very much systematic and structural. It was related to the extraction of the revenue, promotion of deindustrialization, decline of handicrafts. There were different aspects that we can relate here. So in today's class, I hope that you have understood the nature of Dutch imperialism, the rise and fall of Dutch power in India, and how, okay, Dutch came in conflict with the local powers, how Dutch came in conflict with the European counterparts, what were the reasons for that conflict, what are the important areas where Dutch settlements was there. I hope that you have developed command over these basic concepts, right? In next class, I will discuss with you some historiographical insights. So again, whatever we have discussed here in these lectures, okay, the same concepts we will try to look from the historiographical lens, and it will make our understanding more better. So thanks for watching the video and see you in the next class.